Beneath Vatican City lies one of the most mysterious archives in the world, rumoured by some to be the greatest repository of human knowledge. But what exactly are the Vatican archives? And what kind of items are stored there? In recent years, the Vatican has granted exclusive access to researchers, finally revealing the contents of history's most legendary archive. And in this video, I want to show you what they found. The Apostolic Archive is located within Vatican City, the world's smallest sovereign state. It lies adjacent to the Vatican Library, a short walk from the Sistine Chapel and the magnificent St. Peter's Basilica. Today, most of the archive is kept in a purpose-built subterranean facility. It's a sprawling maze of storage rooms, spread across 2 underground levels. Inside, there are hundreds and thousands of individual items. In fact, if you lined up the shelves end to end, they'd stretch over 53 miles. That's roughly the distance from London to Oxford. While no floor plan exists to the public, we do know that at the centre is a highly restricted area known as the bunker, a climate-controlled vault that safeguards the archive's most delicate possessions. As a whole, it's a warren of storage rooms, a network of shelves that seem to go on endlessly. And for much of its history, access to this exclusive collection was only reserved to inner members of the church itself. Due to the secretive nature of the Vatican archives, many have speculated about what might be hidden there. A quick online search turns up no shortage of claims, from forbidden Christian documents to evidence of extraterrestrial life. These claims are unverified, and some are considered to be highly dubious. But one of the most bizarre stories about the Vatican archives doesn't come from conspiracy theories. Instead, it comes from within the church itself. This tale originates from Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk and former physicist, who claimed to have built a device known as the Chronovisor. This machine was a television that allegedly allowed users to witness historical events as if they were happening live. In other words, a time-travelling television. Ernetti said he used the Chronovisor to view scenes from ancient history and confirm events as described in the Bible. Along with the article was this supposed photograph of Jesus and his disciples. Of course, Ernetti's outlandish claims drew widespread skepticism. Such a device is outside the bounds of accepted physics, and the image of Jesus bears a striking resemblance to this widely circulated Christian postcard. Despite this, Ernetti stood by his claims of the Chronovisor, insisting that the Vatican had hidden the Chronovisor to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. According to his testimony, the machine was locked away deep within the Vatican archives, never to be seen again. If you're thinking this sounds like science fiction, well, you're not alone. Skeptics believe it to be from the imagination of Ernetti himself. In any case, he continued to defend the Chronovisor's existence, even until his death in 1994. Over the years, rumours surrounding the Vatican archives have gained a lot of traction, and to be honest, I can understand why. But I think a lot of these rumours originate from the name of the archives themselves. Let me explain. For much of its history, the collection was known in English as the Vatican Secret Archive. I mean, using the word secret is bound to attract speculation. All that changed in 2019, when the late Pope Francis renamed it to Vatican Apostolic Archive. According to his papal letter, it was done in an effort to dispel the reputation that the church was hiding something. Name change or not, what a lot of people may not know is that the archive is actually open to visit, and it has been for more than 100 years. At the end of the 19th century, Pope Leo XIII opened up parts of the archives to historians. For the first time, people from outside the church could visit the collection. If you want to visit, well, you can, provided you fulfill these strict requirements: a master's degree in a relevant field, a letter of recommendation from a professor or university, and a clear description of the specific document you want to view. I was curious, so I made an application of my own, using an official form from the archive's own website. However, after only 20 minutes, my application was sadly rejected. For lucky applicants who get accepted and successfully pass the interview process, you'll be granted temporary access to the Vatican archives. So let's pretend that we made it inside. Congratulations! Now, where's the time machine? Well, the true answer may surprise you, and it's here we turn to next. Walking through the Vatican archives, you are surrounded by rows and rows of shelves, each housing many thousands of items. So, let's take a look at some of them. The reality of the Vatican archives is quite different from the movies. Firstly, there are no booby traps. Looking at you, Tom Hanks. What Angels and Demons does get right is that the Vatican archives contain official records of the Holy See, the central governing body of the Catholic Church. It's essentially a massive warehouse full of papal bureaucracy. Broadly speaking, the archive's contents fall into four main categories: papal letters, private correspondences from the popes, state papers, documents relating to the functioning of the Vatican City, minutes from church councils and trials, and finally, a vast collection simply labelled miscellaneous. While a lot of this might sound like paperwork, look closer and you'll discover secrets that have been kept away for centuries. So what I have here is a selection of items from the Vatican archives. The hidden fate of the Knights Templar. Our first item relates to one of the most powerful organisations of the medieval world, the Knights Templar. The Templars were a military order founded after the First Crusade, a series of Christian wars called to recapture the Holy Land. It was during these bloody years that the Order of the Templars was formed. Originally, they sought to protect Christian pilgrims, but over time, they evolved into one of the most powerful institutions in medieval Europe. But with all that power came enemies. In 1307, King Philip IV of France launched an inquisition against the Templars, accusing them of heresy and devil worship. What followed was the arrest of thousands of Templars, many of whom were forced to confess false crimes. Even their leader, the Grand Master Jacques de Molay, was eventually burnt at the stake in 1314. For centuries, the accepted story was that this inquisition was supported by the Church. But in 2001, all that changed. Deep within the Vatican archives, researchers uncovered a long-lost document known as the Chinon Parchment. It details a secret investigation into the Templars by the Church, one that found them to be innocent of the charges levied against them. In fact, even Pope Clement V absolved the order and quietly forgave the Templars in secret. However, he never made his pardon public. Despite the Templars being secretly forgiven, they were still wiped out. Why? Well, politics. The Chinon Parchment reveals a power struggle between the Pope and King Philip IV. You see, Philip owed the Templars a massive amount of debt. By dismantling the order, he could conveniently erase his financial burden. It appears that the king strong-armed the Pope into complying with his orders. Had the Pope's forgiveness been made public, then the order might have survived to this day. But instead, the document was filed away, buried in the archives for centuries. The Trial of Galileo. Among the most important documents housed in the Vatican archives are the original records from the infamous Trial of Galileo. Galileo Galilei is considered one of astronomy's greatest minds. Having studied the movements of the planets, he defended heliocentrism, the idea that the Earth revolves around the Sun. But at the time, the Church upheld the doctrine of geocentrism, the belief that the Earth was fixed at the centre of the universe. And so, in 1633, Galileo stood before a church inquisition, having been accused of heresy. These precious documents outline the proceedings of Galileo's trial, including his own handwritten defense, in which he desperately argues that his scientific views do not contradict the Christian faith. However, he was unsuccessful. Under pressure, he was forced into a plea bargain. In exchange for his life, Galileo formally withdrew his support for heliocentrism. He spent the remaining 9 years of his life under house arrest, and never lived to see his scientific observations become widely accepted. It wasn't until the modern era that the Church formally acknowledged its mistake, pardoning Galileo and recognising his contribution to astronomy. Today, the Church has now embraced science. In fact, the Vatican now operates its own telescope in southeastern Arizona in the United States. The Passarola. The deeper we go into the Vatican archives, the clearer it becomes that it's very different to the one we see in pop culture. Rather than being a Christian Area 51, instead it's a historian's playground. Housed here are mostly documents, but primary sources from history as it unfolds. And while there might not be any time-travelling television, there is still some sci-fi to be found. Hidden within the archives is a concept for a flying machine known as the Passarola, drafted by a Portuguese priest, Bartolomeu de Gusmão. These unusual drawings depict an aircraft shaped like a bird, with a large central sail flanked by wings on either side. Of course, the Passarola never got off the ground, and it's one of thousands of fantasy aircraft that predate the era of flight. I have to give it some credit though. It is rather inventive. It looks like the church thought so too, and so kept hold of these blueprints, just for safekeeping. Among the most fascinating treasures from the Vatican archives are letters sent to the church by historical figures. One of them is from history's most celebrated artist, Michelangelo, who famously designed several of the Vatican's landmarks, from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel to St. Peter's Basilica. Although this letter is far less glamorous. It's about a payment dispute. According to Michelangelo, the workers in the Vatican had not been paid for 3 months and were threatening to walk off the job. One section reads, "We can't go on like this anymore." The Excommunication of Martin Luther. As you may know, Christianity is not a single unified religion. Today, it is divided into a number of denominations. One major split is between Catholicism and Protestantism, and this next document reveals the very moment that split began. It's a papal bull signed by Pope Leo X, a formal decree that officially excommunicated Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a monk and theologian, but beginning in 1517, he became a fierce opponent of the church and criticised what he saw as corruption. Over time, a reform movement developed around him and spread like wildfire across Northern Europe. This document contains the church's response to the crisis. Luther was banned from preaching and participating in the sacraments. In effect, he was cast out forever. Only one official document of this excommunication letter exists today. A second was sent to Luther himself, although he famously burnt it in a public protest. At the time, no one could have predicted the full significance of this document. It marked the first formal break between Catholicism and Protestantism and triggered the Reformation. Soon, Christianity would begin to fragment across Europe, just like in the Kingdom of England, where Henry VIII appealed to the Pope for an annulment of his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. In fact, the archives contain this letter too, adorned with 81 seals from English noblemen. The Pope, of course, rejected King Henry's request, and so he promptly broke away from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England, placing himself at the head. The Vatican Apostolic Archive is one of the most impressive collections of historical data in the world. While it might not contain any earth-shattering revelations plucked from a Dan Brown novel, it's still a remarkable collection in its own right. It's an extraordinary archive of documents, some of which lie at the very epicenter of world history. Despite what you might have expected, the Vatican archives are not completely closed off. In recent years, there has been a greater trend towards transparency. And yet, a sense of mystery still pervades the archives today. There remains one problem. Visitors wanting to access the archives must request to view specific documents in advance. This raises a paradox. How can you request a document if you aren't even aware of its existence? Perhaps then there are still items tucked away in the Vatican archives that still remain off limits. One can only wonder. Hey, thanks for watching. I had a great time making this, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you like this video and want to see more, why not subscribe? A like and a comment also go a really long way. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.